Welcome to the Time Bubble Podcast, the only podcast where the guests get to travel in time. I am your host, Jason Ayres, and I'm very pleased this week to have an old friend on the show, and that is Natalie Midgley. Welcome, Nat.
Hi.
Hi, it's great to hear you again. It's been a long time since we both lived in Bicester and we've moved away. You've gone north and I've gone west.
It has. It's been a long time.
It has.
20
So,
years.
yeah. So, Natalie has recently qualified as an internal quality assessor and is also the owner of the recently opened Obsidian Salon in Doncaster. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I am in the beauty industry. I wouldn't say it's something that I always thought I would go into. I went into it about 5-6 years ago. I just absolutely loved it. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, I'll try that. And then it's just gone from there. So I've qualified as an assessor. I actually did that in 2014, around the time that we met,
Yes.
through the company that I was working for at the time. And then I built on that knowledge to qualify the third element to get the whole CAVA unit. And then from there, gone on to doing assessing and decided to open my own salon to expand those opportunities for other people like me that maybe wouldn't get the opportunity straight out of training to build a client base. So for me, it's something I'm massive about, like supporting people and getting them through it, but also making sure they're doing it correctly with my training.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, you've certainly come a long way from the deli counter at Sainsbury's, which is where we first met. And I should say that Natalie was my favourite Sainsbury's employee because she had command of the deli counter and we struck up a bit of a friendship. And you had lots of special offers for me. And as somebody who likes their meat, as people probably know from my sausage man exploits, it was all good.
Yeah, it were.
We had many a chat over the counter, putting the world to rights until those other pesky customers wanted served.
We really did.
We did. Good days. Yes. So, okay, let's move on with the podcast then. So you've heard a few episodes, so you know what to expect. We're going to ask you a few questions about your life and places that you'd like to go in time. So to kick off with, tell us about a day of your life that you'd like to revisit.
My first day, and it was really hard to pick these, because I'm very much a person that I believe everything that's happened gets us to where we are now. So I'm like, I don't really want to change anything. But to relive, I'd love to go back to my wedding day. I think it's same for everyone. It just goes so quick and you don't get the opportunity to remember it all. I just remember snapshots of it, but I don't want to relive it as myself. I want to be an onlooker, just a person there watching over it and watching everything that happens.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Funnily enough, I recorded the episode previous to yours. The guest also talked about going back to their wedding day and reliving it, and said more or less the same thing about how quickly it goes. But I like your idea of going as an observer. Because what you said there, we are all on a journey and everything we do gets us to where we are. And it's a shame we can't go back and look at that journey. Now, I was thinking about, when you mentioned that, about soap operas. So, which is, take for example, quite topical because it's recently finished. I know it's a bit twee and not everybody's cup of tea, but everybody knows what Neighbours is. And it recently ended after 35, 40 years. And so obviously there was a lot of stuff about it and showing old clips and such like. And it's, if you were a character in a soap opera, so you could have been Kylie or Jason, for example, that wedding is on film and it's been shown many times. So if you were in a soap, you could, in theory, take Ken Barlow in Coronation Street. You can follow his you can follow his entire life since 1960 and go back and watch the episode. So I like that idea of being able to go back and watch an episode of your life. Though the wedding day idea, great, but then I think, would I want my whole of my last however many years actually recorded for people to see? Because can you imagine if an episode where you did something that perhaps you're not too proud of when you were 17, let's put that on YouTube or wherever. So what you're saying, almost like, say, watching a wedding video.
Yeah.
Did you have a wedding video?
No, it wasn't quite a shotgun wedding, but I never wanted to get married. I didn't want children, and I've ended up with 5, and I would not change it for the world. But we decided in the October to get married, and got married in the December, 2 days before Christmas. It was quite quick, like the way it was arranged, and obviously cut corners. It was on a budget. We got married for less than £3,000 all in. And then left Doncaster a month later. But no, we arranged a photographer. It was when we had that really bad snow. We even had a tractor on standby to get me in 2010. So the photographer didn't turn up. So we had disposable cameras on every table. So that's really all the memories we've got, which is nice when you see something new and someone posts a photo like, I've just found this. But yeah, we've not really got that. So I'd advise a photographer and a videographer at weddings.
I remember December 2010 because that was the 18th of December. I was DJing then, and I was doing a gig in Buckingham, and I drove back, and it was something like minus 20 in the car. And I was doing another gig in a pub in Bicester the following night. And with the forecast, I decided to drive the car into the car park of this pub because I didn't think I'd be able to get there the next day. Yeah. And it was the most horrendous snow I can ever remember. And
that is the time I always think of when I read your time bubble books.
Yeah.
You know, with the cold crisis that comes in the early books. That's what I always think of when I picture it in my head.
Well, I kind of pictured that when I was writing Global Calling, because the pub, because I left my car there and it was literally snowed in. So I walked to there the following night and sort of managed to lug the speakers and stuff from the snow into the pub. But that pub was the one that the pub in my books is based on, and where Lauren was actually holed up when that winter came. So but I remember this that was one of the very few Christmases where there was actually snow around on Christmas Day, even though it was from several days before. It was very deep. So that was you weren't in Bicester then, were you? In 2010 you were somewhere else. So where were you?
In Doncaster then.
Okay,
where I am now.
So I mean, I assume it was probably just as bad, if not. Well, I mean, there's always this assumption.
It started in November.
Yeah.
The end of November, didn't it? And it carried on. But yeah, we ended up having to get a tractor with a little trolley on the back on standby just in case. But I made it in a car just in time. I was late.
But you did your wedding on a budget, and you said 3,000. I think we did. Mine was really on a budget. I think we were more like 300. Because the very pub I'm talking about, the White Hart in Bicester, we paid a couple of £100 to get a marquee up in the back garden. And then we pretty much did everything else ourselves. It was like, I said, I don't want something grand. I just want something fun. So it was literally sort of sausages on sticks and bowls of Twiglets and stuff like that. And everybody loved it. And because I was DJ, I just set all my equipment up with the computer and set the whole thing just on one playlist. So no DJ at all. Press play. That's the music for the next 4 hours. No requests. Just do our thing, but everybody enjoyed it, and we didn't have a video either. Though a few people did take a few videos on their phones and stuff, sort of stuff knocking about. And it wasn't a shotgun wedding either, so to speak. But Ollie was born by then, so he was a baby, and I dressed him up in this little suit. He was 8 months old, and he came along, and it was great. So. So I'd like to go and watch that again, as in the method you describe as an observer. So
should have wore a GoPro.
Yeah. Okay. So that's day one. Let's have a second day.
So I can't actually pinpoint a specific day, but for me, my life has been a massive roller coaster of ups and downs. It's no secret that I've battled with like depression and anxiety and things like that in the past. But I think, and I do get quite emotional speaking about it, if I could go back and just tell little me that everything's going to work out all right. Do you know when you have those days where you're like, this is not going well? Am I doing the right thing? And just feeling so crap.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm saying that word. But yeah, just feeling so rubbish that you just want to reassure yourself that it is going to work out all right and just to keep going. Keep your head up. It will work out in the end.
How old were you at that time, roughly, would you say?
I've gone through patches of it all my life.
Oh, okay.
Tiny, but for me, I think the most poignant one that I can remember is being about 19, single mum to Ella. I just broke up with someone and I just thought, do you know what? My life is over. And literally about 4 or 5 years after that, met Dan. We've been together 14 years now. We've had 3 more children together. And honestly, I could not imagine my life turning out like this. And it's so much, it's better, nicer, just feeling so supported and loved and knowing that there was something better out there, but I just didn't see it at the time. And I think at that age as well, at 19, I mean, I had a kid, but I don't feel like I was mature enough to even appreciate it looking back. And I wouldn't change it at all. Ella's nearly 21 now, and we have the best relationship. And she taught me a lot. And I don't know whether that's a good or bad thing, but yeah, I just feel at that age, you don't really take life for what it is, do you? And then just think it was the end. And then when you realise there's so much more to it, and so grateful for lessons that I've had along the way.
I must admit, I myself went through a lot of dark times when I was younger, particularly in my mid to late teenage years, because there's so much self-doubt. You're launching into the world and all the adults seem so confident and, it's like they've all got their act together. And it's like, what am I going to do for a job? Like say, a girlfriend dumps you or something, and then it's like, well, what's so wrong with me? Oh, I must be really ugly and all this sort of stuff. And you can look back now. I mean, I'm over 50 now, and I could look back and laugh, I suppose, at how naive I was. But I would have liked someone to.
Do you still think you've got like all the answers though? I laugh now and I think, oh, how stupid were I thinking grown-ups had the answer. I'm 38 now, and I thought 38-year-olds had it all together. No,
I don't, to be honest. But I think you get better as you go on.
Yeah, definitely.
So at 40, I was thinking, I'm a lot more together now than I was when I was 30. But then I get to 50, and I was thinking, you were still messing around at 40. You didn't really know what you were doing, and sometimes it feels like we're just playing at life. And so it's like I always used to feel like a bit of a fraud with things I was doing. So I become a DJ and I'm up there doing weddings. I mean, I'm not a real DJ. Someone's going to suss me, or I got when
imposter syndrome.
when I you remember when I had my newspaper column, and it was like, I'm writing for a newspaper every week now. It's like, will anyone notice that I'm not a proper writer? And that with the books, it's like, well, I've got 12 books out, but someone's going to rumble me sooner or later. So you never quite feel completely comfortable in your own skin, do you? But I suppose if we didn't, we'd have nothing to sort of to strive for.
With,
but I do have these things in my books where people go back and revisit their past selves. I don't know if I went back to my 18, 19-year-old self, what my 18, 19-year-old self would say to me. It's like, what do you know, you old git?
Yeah, definitely. I would be the same. I'm not saying I was a horrible person, because I've never really been that way, but definitely want to listen to me.
No. Well, I suppose there's this, even though you have this self-doubt and stuff when you're young, there's also a certain arrogance attached, and you don't you don't maybe acknowledge that older people have been that age and been through all the same things. But it's good to go back and reassure yourself. And we've touched on these sort of things before. The last episode I recorded, there was quite a sad story with the guy's boss who committed suicide, and he talked about wondering whether he could have done anything about it, but he came to the conclusion that he probably couldn't have done that. She was already on that journey, but she was a lot older, you see, so she was the sort of age I am now. But I say, when I was younger, I did have these dark moments, and probably listening to the Smiths didn't help. Or maybe it did, because it's like, well, things are going badly, but I'm not as having as bad a time
I'm
not having as bad a time as Morrissey is, so I'll get by. So, but I made it, and you made it, so we're still here, and we're doing things we enjoy doing. So
we've got stories to tell.
Yeah.
Along the way.
Well, that's the great thing about this podcast. We can tell them. So get them out to the world. Okay. Nice one. So we've got one more day to do from your past life. So what's that
it's a sad one for me as well. For me, I'd want to go back to see the last time I saw my granddad alive. It was in hospital and he was poorly, but I just wish I could hug him a little bit longer. I didn't know that he was gonna die. I didn't know it would be the last time I saw him alive. And literally a month later, it was Christmas Eve, he passed away as well. We said he'd do anything to get out of Christmas. But yeah, I just hugged him a little bit longer and told him I loved him.
Oh, how long ago?
The year before I got married, so 2009. I was pregnant with Kian, and I'd just been out to get Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve, as you do, last minute, Larry. And my mum called me and said Grandad's passed away. And it is sad, but we look back at him, he was so funny, so funny. He didn't care. There was no political correctness where my granddad was concerned. And I'm not saying I agree with everything he said and did, but absolutely loved the bones of that man. He was brilliant.
Tell us a little bit more about him. So what did he do for a living? What did he do in his life?
So he was a coal miner. All my family, like coal mining background, Doncaster, Conisbrough way. So he was a coal miner, and the time that I remember him, he never actually worked. He just went on a lot of holidays to Scarborough, always took us along for the ride with him, sent us to shop for his paper to give us 10 bob for sweets, and I always remember him taking us to the cinema to see Jurassic Park, letting us fill our pick and mix up, which was like mega expensive. That never happened with our parents. And it was just fun loving. He used to tell us that on a Sunday that he had to go to church to see the vicar and play the organ. It was in my later years that I found out what he meant was he was going to the working men's club round the corner to have a pint with the barman.
Brilliant.
So, yeah,
lovely. Yeah, it's interesting that I think all of us have a different type of relationship with our grandparents to what we have with our parents. With your parents, it's, I'm not saying that this is true of everyone, but there's always a bit of fractious tension, and because you live with them all the time and you're growing up and you have disagreements and rows, and your parents are directly responsible for you, and they may tell you can't do this, you can't have that, etc. But grandparents, because they don't have you all the time, and they're older, they're retired, they're settled in life, and they don't see you so often, but they love the fact that they've got grandchildren. So all I remember mine were always like showering me with sweets. You said about your granddad going to get the paper. It's always like down to the paper, and this is 1975, 76, and I always got 6p to spend on, which went quite a long way.
I know, I was just going to say that. It went forever, didn't it? My 50p did on that 10 bob, as he called it. But that was my dad's granddad. My dad's dad, sorry. But my mum's parents, I left home at 13, because obviously I thought I know best. And I went to live with my nana and granddad. My nana absolutely adore the bones of her as well. My nana and granddad, from my mum's side, they it sounds awful saying, but they're more to me like my parents. My nana, she's great. She's my moral compass. If I've got anything that I need to bounce off, I do go to her. So I definitely agree with that. With grandparents, I have a really good bond with mine.
See, I'm at that in between stage of life now where all my grandparents have gone, but I haven't got any grandchildren of my own yet. So there's this sort of crossover period. But obviously, I like the idea of having grandchildren one day.
Yeah,
But not just yet, because my boys are teenagers. So I hope they behave themselves.
I've got grand dogs. Ella's got 2 dogs that she treats like children, Hugo and Ernie.
Oh, I
And
love that.
sends me birthday cards and everything.
I like that expression, grand dogs. I've never heard that before. Is that in common usage?
I don't know.
It's a good word. It's a good word. I'm going to remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's great. So we'll move on to a couple more questions. Some people like to combine these, but we'll see. So we're going to ask you about a famous person, past or present, that you might want to inhabit for a day to see what it's like being them, and then also an era of history that you might like to visit, and we can have a talk about that.
Mine are a little bit linked, actually.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to pick because I love history. So I love like the Viking era. I love that. And I was listening to one of your podcasts when you said about people being related to William the Conqueror. I found him in my family tree.
Wow. Have you gone back that far?
Yeah, I managed to trace it back that far, only on one side of the family though. So yeah, I was like struggling to pick someone. But I think for me, Queen Victoria, obsessed with her since being little. Went to Isle of Wight in year 5 on a school trip, took us to Osborne House. I've since taken my kids there. Absolutely love her. I just want to know what she was really like. Obviously, you see depictions of her with the Victoria programme. Love that, watched all that. Yeah. And obviously, the relationship with Albert and her advisors, the relationship with India, with the children, how she had the little house at Osborne where they got dressed up and it did adult things, like they learned to cook. It was like their own little mini house and things. And I just love that. I just loved her. Not even for the royal thing, just to see what she was actually like as a person. I find it really fascinating.
So bearing in mind her long history,
a long reign,
and you've got to pick a day. Which time period of
coronation?
Victoria?
We'll go for a coronation.
So early on.
Yeah. Coronation. I just want to see what she was genuinely like as a person. Like on the paintings and things you see of, I wouldn't say she's quite an attractive lady or anything like that, but her morals seem to, I don't know, she seemed to do a lot for people, but again, they're just depictions, aren't they? But then when you see like the Victoria programme, where she's depicted as some beautiful lady, and obviously there were scandals within that as well. So I don't know, I just want to, I do like history.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the depictions we tend to see of her are more of her later years.
Yeah.
We see it, which I can kind of understand, because obviously photography came in during that era. I mean, photography, I think, started around about the 1840s and it developed through the 19th century. So naturally, there are going to be more pictures of her in her sort of later years. And the sort of the image you get is obviously the sort of the grieving widow, which was the role she really kind of played.
She actually had, I don't know if you know this, but outside of her bedroom, I mean, she had photos of Albert all around, but she had a photo that had curtains over, and she used to draw that on a night and open it in the morning. Not a photo, a painting of Albert outside of the bedroom, and that's what she used to do to say goodnight. And she liked the photo so that it was the first thing she saw when she woke up and the last thing she saw when she went to sleep, which is quite, it's sad, but it's lovely. I mean, I'm a sucker for a love story as well.
So if you were going to play her for a day, would you take the opportunity to utter her most famous line?
I don't know her most famous line, I don't think.
Well,
how about
that? when I say it, you will. So there's this thing always going around that Queen Victoria was supposed to have said. I don't know the circumstances of when she said it, but it's, "We are not amused." You must have heard that before.
No, I don't. I haven't. No.
Well, it's one of those. It's one of those kind of almost like cliches now, like Captain Kirk saying "Beam me up, Scotty," or something like that. It's passed into the sort of lexicon, and it's one of those things that you do wonder. I don't know if she ever actually did say it. Somebody will know. I'm going to look it up afterwards.
I'm going to now that you've said that. I think for me
But
it was more the time period and things like that, and just being so fascinated by everything as a youngster. Then I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
but you can guarantee probably that if anybody makes any sort of drama that features Queen Victoria, they will slip that line in there somewhere.
wow.
So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because she's been gone a long time now. But I've said this before. I remember as a kid, there were elderly relatives that still remembered her being on the throne,
Victoria, yeah,
which sounds amazing now because it's what now 120 years, something like that,
yeah,
since
1901
the
when she
end
died.
of the Victorian era.
Yeah,
And we talk about the Victorian era a lot, don't we? I mean, when I hear the words Victorian era, I tend to think of the entire 19th century. Well, obviously, she wasn't queen for
yeah,
the entire 19th century. It was the second half and a bit
yeah,
of it, but it is a fascinating period of history. Did you say that was? I was
yeah,
preempting you here, but
yeah.
I asked you earlier
That,
about what period of history you'd like to visit, and we talked
yeah,
about that time.
yeah. So for me, it was the Victorian era, York's cobbles and London and the little the close knit communities and things like that as well, and just the way of life. I mean, I know there were a lot more diseases around then because it was so close, but I just love that time period.
Yeah,
And it's strange, really, because what I pioneer for now, not feminism, I'm no way a feminist, but obviously being able to support yourself as a strong, independent woman within the beauty industry.
yeah,
Obviously, back then that wasn't a thing. Like women were very much in the kitchen, but at the same time, they were quite strong home leaders, weren't they? Because the men were out doing
yeah.
whatever they did. So it's a strange one. But yeah, I'd love to go back to the Victorian era.
Yeah, well, I mean, a working class woman would have had to have been strong because there was so much to do. I mean, obviously they had many more children
Yeah,
because of the infant mortality,
yeah,
and that must have been a very tough thing to deal with. We all hear stories of, she had 9 children and only 3 survived to adulthood, and
yeah,
I often wonder how difficult that was for people because in our modern society, if a child was to die for any reason, it is an absolute tragedy. But
yeah,
it was an everyday occurrence
yeah.
for them. Were they as traumatized by that as we are, do you think? Or is it
Yeah, I feel like they kind of got used to it, but then now because it's more spoken about, it's more
yeah,
not understood as in, oh, that's the reason why it happened, but as in that it's not something that's normal anymore. Whereas there
no.
it was like we've got a better understanding, haven't we, with like cholera and typhoid and things like that
Yeah.
aren't right. And
You, you
yeah, I
see,
don't know.
I my view is
Yeah,
that every death of your own flesh and blood is a tragedy. And
yeah,
I think they would have felt it as keenly as we
yeah,
would. And it must have been extremely traumatic for these people. And as I say, they had hard lives. So, yes, the men went out to work, but all of the things that they needed to do were far more difficult than they are for us. So,
yeah.
I mean, the washing.
Oh,
Um, so you've got a big family, and
yeah,
London. I'm going to pick London because it's
yeah,
the image you have. Was the further back you go in history, it was very dirty and grimy. I mean, a lot of the what would have been called probably the London slums and stuff were cleared away. But certainly in the early part of the 19th century, all these little alleys and
yeah,
overhanging upstairs rooms that made them almost very dark and cave-like. And I'm sure there was probably a lot of crime
yeah.
and uh, I would like to go and see it, but I imagine I
I wouldn't
wouldn't.
want to stay there.
No, I wouldn't want to stay there.
Okay.
You might be better going back to your original video idea and actually watching it from a safe distance. Because if one of us probably walked into that environment, dressed as we are and everything else, we
Yeah.
would we'd be lucky to come out without getting mugged at the very at the very least, I would think. But yeah, it's like I say, the amount of work they must have had to do. I mean, the washing. See, my grandmother, and again, it always sounds like I'm talking about the Victorian era, but in the early 70s,
Yeah.
she was still doing the washing the traditional way, and she had it was always done on a Monday, which seems to be a traditional thing, and she had this great big the mangle thing with the
Yeah.
handle, which she used to put through to
The
dry
scrubbing
the
board as
clothes.
well.
Yeah, and it just sounds, people think of that as a lot longer ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to get into this sort of this when I were a lad, Hovis, and my granny doing the washing and start going on about outside toilets and all those other cliches.
Yeah.
But it was really still like that. And I'd say I've mentioned it earlier and before. In the 1970s, that connection to the Victorian way of life was still there. And I think that was probably the last decade in
Yeah.
which we had it. And after that, it changed. But there's a
Yeah.
lot more to. I mean, we talk about everyday lives, but there's so much more in Victorian times too. We have talked about it before. The amazing advances in
Yeah.
technology. I mean, we tend to think of the 20th century of being the big era of because it was cars, planes, computers. But if you look at the 19th century, the difference between the start and end of that century is quite substantial, because we had
Yeah.
the railways, and it's the feats of engineering. I mean, you go to some of
Incredible.
these museums that have all the industrial machinery and the engines, and these things are magnificent.
Yeah, we've got a fantastic museum in Doncaster, and they've got a big old train in there at the minute with the tracks and things, because obviously Flying Scotsman's related to Doncaster, and all their steelworks. And my granddad actually worked on the railway, not the one we spoke about earlier, the one that's very much still alive. So yeah,
Yeah,
I love all that. But it's like when you see pyramids for Egyptians, like they built those with what? It,
yeah.
it's just crazy.
It's the ingenuity,
Yeah,
and the brains that the people have had throughout history. It's easy for us to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, we're a modern, technically advanced society, and those were all primitive people. Well, they can't have been that primitive or
no,
unintelligent, because they wouldn't have been able to build the world that we inhabit today.
yeah. That
And
is
it
still about today, isn't it, as well?
I know. For somebody like me, I'm not a practical person. I
Yeah.
would, if you put a bonnet up on a car and told me to fix it, I wouldn't have a clue where to start. It's just, and when I look at these things that these people built, and every machine, all the different parts and what they all do, and it just blows me away. It is rocket science to
Yeah.
me. Even
Yeah.
an engine from 200 years ago. It's like, how did they
Yeah.
figure out how to do that and make that? And
I often wonder that. There's other things like vanilla flavoring when it comes from a beaver's anal gland. Who figured that out? Why? Why? Why did they do that? I
I
mean, it's great that they did, but that's genuinely true.
that's
Don't
something
understand.
I had no idea
Did you
about
look it
that.
up? I
So
promise
so
you
we've
it's
both
true.
learned something today.
Vanilla. If it's not from the vanilla
All I
pod,
can
it
think
is.
now is about beaver anal glands. That's going to be in my head all day now.
It's like vanilla, Jason. You're fine.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure about that now. I think I'll stick to strawberry ice cream from now on.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, this has been a really interesting chat. One of the best ones we've done. Yeah, it's so good to, obviously, you're an old friend, and just catch
Yeah,
up and talk about all this stuff. So,
yeah,
yeah, we must do it again sometime.
definitely. And not
And
leave it as long.
no, well, this is the thing. I talked about this before, how you'll know this as a military wife moving
Yeah,
around. You make these friends in different places, and you move on. And I found it difficult when I first moved away to make new friends, but it's important to keep in touch with the old ones. And in
definitely.
theory, it should be easier now than it
Yeah, with
ever was.
technology. But that's what it is. It convinces you that you've still got that connection because you see
Yeah,
that that's what it is. But
yeah.
yeah, human interaction. We've
Yeah,
spoke about
we did. We talked about it before we came on air, and we do. That'd be my message to people: get out there, go to the cafe, go to the pub, go and talk to your neighbours, and let's not all stay in little boxes on our phones and computers, because
Definitely.
we need to keep society going.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we go, you talked a little bit about your salon earlier. Where can people find that, and what sort of things do you offer?
So I offer all sorts of beauty treatments, brows, lashes, the typical things. And I've just branched into aesthetics. So I've done microneedling and fat dissolve.
I could do with some fat dissolve for sure.
It's brilliant. I've done my own. It is really good.
Yeah.
Really good. But yeah.
That's
So
brilliant.
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you every success with that. I think
Thank you very much.
what you've achieved over the last few years, without sounding too gushing, is fantastic. And it just shows that everybody can do it if they've got the dedication.
Honestly, it really does. Really does.
Yeah. Thank you.
I commit myself sometimes. No, thank you so much for having me on. It's been brilliant.
It has, yes.
Really
And we must keep in touch and have more of these chats. Because it's been great. We've had 2 chats this morning. I'll just for listeners, this is our second 40-minute Zoom call. We started the first one and we filled the whole thing in just chatting before we even thought about starting an episode. So
we could talk for hours though.
We always used to, didn't we? But it was those pesky customers wanting their slices of Wiltshire ham. Interrupting us,
having to do my actual job.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. Right. Well, I shall let you go. Thank you very much for coming on.
You're more than welcome. I've loved it. Please have me sometime.
I will. And that's it for this week. We'll see you again soon. So bye-bye.
Bye.